Good. And of course, we record so you can rewatch it at any time you like, or if you have to miss a session, you can catch up. Okay, now let's go to risk. We started talking about this last session to a degree, but I will give a prize out. Loretta got the ball rolling with prizes in the early arrival trivia, but I'll give a prize out if anybody can tell me the international formula for risk. So it's a formula, something times something equals risk. Let's see if anybody's got an idea. Oh, there we go. It's coming in nicely. So, yep, Ashley was on it first, I think. So I'm going to put my chat over here, which is, yeah, likelihood times severity. You could call it, yep, likelihood times impact, or likelihood times consequence, or probability times consequence. But this is not just road safety risk. I'm talking about like economic risk, environmental risk, occupational health and safety risk, risk on the road. We always talk about what is the chance a bad thing is going to happen, and then what's the magnitude of badness. You know, what's the risk of earthquake? Well, it's the chance there will be an earthquake, but then, you know, how big is that earthquake? What's the magnitude of that earthquake? That's the risk of earthquake. You know, you can, yeah, for everything, that's what it is. Now, interestingly, in a safe system assessment, so that's the first component of a safe system audit, remember? In a safe system assessment, there was a decision to extract out exposure from likelihood. So let me explain a little bit what that means. When we looked at risk on the road network for a very long time, we always talked about, well, what's the chance of a crash? And then what's the severity of that crash going to be when it happens? And the chance of the crash was driven by the number of people exposed to that crash. So just the sheer traffic volume, or the number of pedestrians crossing, or the number of cyclists using that route. Okay, that was like, likelihood was really driven by that. And then within the likelihood of crash was physical infrastructure characteristics, such as, was it a high-speed environment, a low-speed environment? Was it very clear where the crossing was, or that who had priority, or these sorts of things? So the decision was made in a safe system assessment. The first part of the safe system audit was to say, well, let's take that exposure, the number of people exposed or number of vehicles exposed to a crash, and let's extract that out of likelihood. Then we'll just look at the likelihood of crash just from the physical characteristics of the road environment, and maybe the people using that area. Are they all intoxicated, so they're more likely to have issues, or are they all, you know, very alert and compliant, or the like? And then when the crash happens, how bad will it be? So what we do in a safe system audit, or a safe system assessment being the first part of a safe system audit, is we quantify each of these for different crash types. So we actually put some numbers to these for different crash types. I will walk you through that process sort of step by step. But the first real sort of learning priority here is to make sure we can categorize things into these three elements. Make sure we really clear in our mind, okay, what is influencing exposure? What is influencing likelihood? And what is influencing severity or consequence? Okay, so remember to look out for your wallies as well, of course. So let's just sort of recap here and get our head back in this exposure, likelihood, and severity space. Exposure, because that's the number of people, the number of vehicles that are exposed to a crash, it really comes down to what's your sort of traffic volume, or your pedestrian numbers or your cyclist numbers. In safe system assessing and safe system auditing, I just want you to think of exposure as number. Okay? What is the number? What is the volume? What is the AADT, so the annual average daily traffic, or what is the pedestrian numbers per day? Numbers, right? And then we can influence the number of people exposed to a crash by doing things like closing a road or closing, in this case, a level crossing. So it's kind of closed. It's a bit hard to see, but there's no exposure. Or making it so there's no exposure to a particular crash type. So that might be separating vulnerable road users or pedestrians or cyclists or the like onto their own path. So they're not exposed to that vehicle to cyclist conflict, or a lot less of them are. And so we're thinking about numbers. Likelihood is about a whole lot of things we've done for a very long time, often in road safety, which is things like the surface we provide, sealed shoulders, all the line marking, lighting, the geometric design, so how the road curves. These are all things trying to stop crashes happening, help people keep control of their vehicles, stay on the paved roadway or on the roadway itself, not leave the roadway. And if they do see something, avoid it. So we continue to work on ways to lessen the likelihood of crashes. Things like wide center lines are really lessening the likelihood of a head-on crash, but they're not doing anything for the severity of it when it does occur, because it's the same speed of vehicle and they still crash head on the same speed, and the same severity outcomes are there. So that's likelihood. If we look at intersections, things like traffic signals, they influence the likelihood of crash. Now, there will be a whole lot of changes in crash profile when you put a set of traffic signals from a passively controlled intersection. So that's a give way sign or a stop sign. There'll be a change dynamic, but what you will see is that you still have crashes occurring at the same severity levels. Okay, there'll be less of them, but that severity level is absolutely still there. And that's because people run red lights. They they miss red lights, or they're trying to beat the lights, or these sorts of things. And we see same angles of crashes, same speeds of crashes, sometimes even higher. So the severity is still there, but there's less chance of crashing because everybody should be clear on when they can go and when they should stop. Yes, mistakes are going to happen, and we need to factor that into our thinking as safe system practitioners, but there'll be less crashes, absolutely. That's well evaluated, well defined. The severity remains. So how do you actually address severity of crashes? Well, you only have a small number of things in your toolkit to address severity, because it's biomechanics of injury and physics. That's what we're working with here. So speed is going to be a huge one in severity outcomes, because our kinetic energy equations have squared in them. And so the more we can address speed where crashes are going to happen, the less the severity of the incident. So speed is one. Angle is one. So the angle of crashes, now this is especially and predominantly the case with passenger vehicle crashes. If we can get more angle on crashes like that, we see more of the energy pushed out into the environment. So they bounce off each other. That's your year 11 vectors, if you remember physics class. I hope you do. I hope you were paying attention. But it's, that one, if you can get more angle on that crash, you get a less severe outcome, because the energy of the vehicle is not getting pushed into that other vehicle. Some of it is a bounce off, essentially. So severity, if we can slow vehicles. So here's some raised safety platforms in Christchurch. You can see slowing vehicles just at that point where we know some are going to crash. Barrier systems. Barrier systems are all about the severity of crashes, because when a vehicle leaves their lane and they hit a barrier system, that is a crash. All right. But that crash is managed in terms of the energy, where the energy is dissipated over time along the system, as opposed to a tree or a culvert or the like, where they abruptly stop and all the energy transfer happens very, very quickly. Now, we can dissipate that energy over time, which significantly lessens the severity of crashes. But if you're looking at infrastructure and you're saying, okay, we're putting a barrier system in to lessen the chance of a crash, that's not correct. No, we're putting a barrier system in to lessen the severity of crashes that occur. Actually, putting a barrier system in increases the likelihood of crash, because we've all of a sudden, take the median, for example. Well, we've put something throughout the whole median to hit. Some of the vehicles, when there was no median barrier there, would have left their lane, gone into the opposing lane, got a fright, and gone back into their lane and carried on. No crash would have happened. But putting the barrier system in means that they hit a barrier system, they're involved in a crash. We just know that that's going to be a very low severity incident. So the safe system, an application of the safe system, needs to really think about all of these elements. Have we done everything we can in all these elements, or have we been able to leverage one of these elements to eliminate the whole crash possibility? Because have a think about that. If you are able to eliminate exposure to a crash, right? So close the intersection. You are not going to have any intersection crashes because there is no intersection there. There is no exposure to crashes. All right. I'm going to jump to severity. If we have absolute confidence when people crash that they are going to walk away from it or just have very minor injuries that they recover from, that essentially is okay under the safe system. Like, we don't want it from the management and operation of a road network and street network. We don't want people continuously making minor incidents and being involved in those things. But at that pure safe system perspective, you say that's okay, because mistakes are going to happen, and people are walking away from this. If we could eliminate the likelihood of crash, right, that would mean that we're good from the other perspectives, because it doesn't matter how many people are exposed to crashes and how bad they're going to be, there are no crashes, right? But this one, well, that one is sort of aviation theory, right? They basically said, well, we can't do anything about severity of crashes. You're doomed, right? Exposure, yeah, well, we're taking as many passengers and doing as many flights as we possibly can. We have to do absolute elimination of the likelihood of crash, right? Now, the road system is so open, so many sort of, in terms of the users and the people and all of those factors, that elimination of likelihood, like, it is possible, but you will not have a private transport mode, okay? You have to eliminate that. Or like you have to essentially make it as hard to drive a car as it is to fly a plane, and put in all of the security controls around that. Now, we like, generally people have said that that is not the way we're going to manage and operate our road system. It's going to be continue to be something that assists people in going about their daily lives, and the economy, and taking the kids to rugby practice and all of that sort of stuff, right? So what we need to do then is make it so that when mistakes happen, because they absolutely will, we've addressed either the severity or exposure. Okay, so hopefully that makes a bit of sense, and you'll see why I sort of have harped on about this for a while, because you cannot do a safe system audit under New Zealand's safe system audit framework without understanding what is severity, what is likelihood, what is exposure. And in fact, you're going to get an assignment at the end of today, which is quick, but it is all about, can you categorize exposure, likelihood, severity? Loretta, have we got questions already?
Thank you. Yeah. Look, you may have covered this, so forgive me, but I'll just read through what Max wrote in the chat. Isn't that somewhat ethically problematic if volumes of, say, pedestrians are low because a road is unsafe? Using exposure to affect the process might perpetuate an unsafe situation and could even lead to perverse outcomes, such as a project that is increasing pedestrian numbers could have a worse safety outcome afterwards, even if likelihood and severity stay exactly the same.
Yeah, so prize for Max for asking the absolute right questions. Okay, so there's two things. One is that when you do a safe system audit, safe system assessment, you can use predictive numbers for exposure. So you're not going to get caught up in that scenario of oh, there's no pedestrians crossing here, so exposure is low, but there's no pedestrians crossing there because it's so dangerous that like they'd be insane to do so. That's the old what's that old saying about latent demand? You don't build a bridge. You don't build a bridge over a river based on how many people swim across the river, or something like that. Yeah, you probably can articulate that better than me. But anyway, so the idea being that we can take in predicted volumes. And then the next one then to address as part of that is, okay, so if we build something, we get all these pedestrians come here to cross, then our risk will go up. And my answer to that, and Max's point is that not unfair on the project? And my point is, if there's a high risk and you're going to send more people there, we need to do something about that risk. We need to address severity and likelihood, hopefully, and ensure that, okay, we now know we're going to attract pedestrians to an area. Hey, that's a great thing. I'm all about getting more active transport and everything like that, but not if we're sending them to somewhere that is unsafe. We need to then, increase the safety of that area through reduction in the likelihood and severity of incident. So hopefully that answers that. Happy to dig further into that one, but great question. And then we've got a few examples there of different features that would lessen the likelihood of crashes: rumble strips, chevron alignment markers, and then yes, Max talking about swimming with the crocodiles. So that's a good point. Okay, let's start to think and apply some of this exposure, likelihood, and severity thinking, categorizing those elements of risk into some different road environments. Now, this session I'll probably be a little more focused on vehicle-to-vehicle crashes. We have next session is all about pedestrians and cyclists and how the exposure, likelihood, and severity thinking applies directly to those road users. And we're going to have a chat a bit about motorcyclists later on. I'll probably be a bit more focused on vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, which currently is dominant, so vehicle-to-vehicle and single vehicle run-off road are your dominant sources of death and serious injury in New Zealand. However, over the next 20 years, that's probably going to change. Vehicle technologies adding more and more reduction in that percentage of crashes. So then other road users become more and more dominant portions of our death and serious injury on the road network. So intersections present this really interesting risk point in the network. And there's the obvious reason for that. You can see it on the screen there. Well, we've got conflict points is what we call them. So conflict points are simply, ways that vehicles can crash with each other, or vehicles could crash with pedestrians or cyclists. So I'll show you a conflict point diagram later on. But this is not the only reason risk increases around intersections. Actually, we see runoff road crashes increase around intersections because vehicles avoid other vehicles. So a vehicle makes a bad call about entering the intersection or misses the red light, and the other vehicle traveling along at speed, well, they don't want to crash into them, so they try to avoid and they leave the road. And it just happens that we also put a lot of fixed hazards around intersections. So that could be signal pedestals, but we also put power poles because we need the power lines to turn down the side road often. So you're putting a power pole there. You often have culverts because you need to get your water under the road at these locations because it's got to cross this other road. So all of a sudden we've increased the chance, the likelihood of people leaving the road. And we've also added features to make sure it's very severe. So this is not a great combination. So what you see if you ever get a plot, and some of you have probably got this, of risk along a route. So if we go, this is chainage down here. So that's sort of distance along the road. Called chainage is the term we tend to use. And this is risk up here. What you'll see is that there'll be risk bubbling along in the mid-block sections. And then, it'll pop up like that to an intersection, pop up like that. So they're the intersections. It's not just that vehicle-to-vehicle crash, but it's the runoff road. And it's also a location where pedestrians are going to be crossing, cyclists are going to be crossing. We have this big exposure of others to crash forces. Now, the severity matrix, which we're thinking about, really says, okay, what's the speed that crash is going to happen at? Not what is the speed limit? What is the speed the incident is going to happen at? It's often very driven by speed limit, but what is the speed the crash will happen at? And what is the crash type? And here are a few just to keep you thinking along those lines. We've got pedestrians versus heavy vehicles. We've got car versus car, side impact at a right angle. We've got trees, so cars hitting trees. We've got head-on car versus heavy vehicle. And you can start to get an idea from this. How bad do you generally expect the outcome to be? And of course, there'll be outliers. There'll be things that happen and you'll see death at a very, very low speed, or you'll see people surviving very high speed incidents. But there's a general indication for you. And in fact, it says that down there, doesn't it? General indication only. But we will be using that later down the track, using these numbers, getting that severity, idea of severity. This is one of the real beauties of the safe system audit approach, using safe system assessments first, is that it forces everyone to think about the severity of incidents. For so many decades, a lot of, especially infrastructure engineers, have simply focused on stopping crashes happening. And that's been a really important thing to happen and really wonderful. But mechanical engineering colleagues in vehicles, for example, well, they were leagues ahead of us in identifying that, okay, we're going to do what we can to stop the crashes happening with good brakes and windscreen wipers and headlights and these sort of things. But we're going to start thinking about what happens when these crashes happen. And okay, let's go with some seat belts. Okay, that's that, and airbags and crumple zones and a whole lot of sort of energy management characteristics. Us in the road space, well, there was a little bit of that with barrier systems early on, but it sort of didn't ever get as much traction until the safe system really sort of starts to take hold. And here's a table just with a little bit more information about some of those crash angles and speeds between passenger vehicles. You can see there that about 50 kilometers an hour is our right angle crash threshold. That we really can't have crashes able to happen at 90 degrees with a bullet vehicle of more than 50 kilometers an hour. It will just have this big jump up in the amount of people killed and seriously injured in those crashes. You can get a bit more angle on it. You can start to go up to about 60 is where we sort of tend to max out to a degree. And that, ChemX, for anybody who's wondering what that is, it's just a, it's the kinetic energy management model. It's essentially a computer program you can use to delve into this in more precise detail. That is far beyond what you would ever need to do in a safe system audit. Like that, you just can be fairly general in your thinking. Okay, that looks like it's about a right angle. Okay, and about 90 degrees. Yeah, about 90 degrees, about 50 kilometers an hour or below. Okay, there's a bit more angle on that. Yeah, so we can go maybe up to about 60. That's sort of the way you think about it. But remember, this is your delta V. Your delta V, this is change in speed. So if you are able to have one vehicle going at 100 kilometers an hour and another vehicle basically coming in right beside it at 120 kilometers an hour, and as those two hit, well, their delta V is only 20, isn't it? So that's okay. That's all within sort of tolerances. Yeah, you're going to have to think about what happens to these vehicles after they strike each other, but at the actual transfer of energy between vehicles, we're in that sort of delta V position. So yeah, you don't need to be this precise, although if you've got somebody sitting doing a road design in CAD, they can just overlay angles on it very easily. But yeah, for this sort of stuff, you'd really just sort of be saying, well, yeah, a vehicle, I'll change color here, a vehicle coming out of the side road here, trying to do a right turn, being struck by a vehicle coming this way. Well, that's going to be about a 90-degree crash, isn't it? Okay, it's actually precisely 104 degrees, but close enough to 90. So we sort of think, okay, we want to get vehicle speeds down to 50 or below. If it's just passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle, we're thinking about. Of course, if there's pedestrians or cyclists that we're adding into the mix, we may have to alter that. Over this side, we go, okay, so we've got a vehicle coming down here, and they're striking a vehicle who's already made their turn to a degree. All right, so 27 or some angle like that. Well, maybe that one's more like 60 kilometers an hour we can get to. So you start to play around with the existing parameters you understand and give that idea of where we're at. Okay, time for you to do a little bit of an exercise for me. Now, I'm going to give you a good bit of time to have a think about this, and you'll probably be able to use this as a bit of a time to have a stretch as well. I'm going to dive you into this intersection here, and I'm going to get you to redesign the intersection to make it safe system, or as well aligned with safe system principles as you possibly can. Our aspiration is for there never to be a death and serious injury in this area ever again. That's our aspiration, and I want you to see what you can do to change it to get as close to that as you can. I'll explain the area, the context of it, and then I will give you some specifics on what you, I'm going to give you some budgetary constraints and a few other things. But okay, what we've got here is residential area, residential, it's all residential. There is a school about 400 meters down this side road. This side road is 50 kilometer per hour. This main arterial state highway is 70 kilometers per hour. It's got 22,000 vehicles a day going through there, and at about 12% of those are trucks. The side road has about 2,000 vehicles a day, and they're mainly just local access and go to the school drop off and pick up. This is a shared user path. This is a drainage culvert, so water comes sort of in this side and drains out into this sort of flood area, overflow area. That's a bus stop. This is a bus route. What else can I tell you? Oh, these service roads, they're sort of two-way service roads. They have access points further down here and further up here. About 400, 500 meters up the road, this direction is a set of traffic signals, and then about a kilometer or so down the road this way, there's a set of traffic signals. Let's just have a quick look on the ground here. That's sort of what you see. There's the intersection. So there's the bus stop we were talking about. That's the side road. You see it's got a turn lane. It's got some other features there. And this side, you can see there the drain structure. You can see the shared path over there. Okay. So your task is to, remove fatal and serious injury crashes at this location. You have a budget of $4 million. I'll give you a little, maybe I'll give you a little bit more than that. I'm going to give you 5 million. There you go. Get an extra million for a Thursday. You cannot close the intersection. Okay, there's community consultations happen. They just absolutely won't fly. They need to be able to access this from both directions and get out all directions. And you're operating in your current political framework. So whatever, sort of think about your local area, so you can't do something, well, you can propose something, very radical, a 10 km/h speed limit on this main road. And I'm going to ask you, well, how do you think you might be able to actually navigate that through so it's actually something that's approved? But the key thing on this one is I want you to start practicing things into exposure or likelihood or severity. So every time you say something that you want to change, I want you to tell me, is that going to influence the exposure to crashes, the likelihood of crashes, or the severity of crashes? So maybe, for example, you say, oh, okay, I'm going to do lighting improvements. I'm going to make sure there's, more street lights down there. Now, be a strange thing to say. You haven't seen any night photos and you don't know it. But anyway, you would say improve street lighting and then just brackets L. That will reduce the likelihood of crashes, because street lighting is just going to make it less likely for people to crash. If there's low light conditions, they'll be able to see pedestrians, they'll be able to see other vehicles, they're more aware there's an intersection there, the lighting would reduce the chance of crash. But there's nothing there to slow vehicles down, change the angles, improve any of those severity characteristics. And exactly the same number of vehicles will be exposed to that, and the same number of people will be exposed to that. So it's just a likelihood addressing factor. Now, some of you are probably going, well, I don't know how much stuff costs. How am I meant to, understand what I can do with $5 million? Well, I will be your instant cost estimator tool. So if you want a cost estimation of something, you simply write that into the chat. Say cost, ? Overpass, flyover, grade separation. So that, one road over the other. And I would quickly say that will cost you $47 million. And you'll go, oh, I can't afford that in my one. Okay, Max has gone cost underpass. So a pedestrian underpass. Would be 4.8 million to utilize the existing structure, deepen it, add all the lighting, a gap for, make it something people might actually use. So there's a lot in there because you're gonna have to rip up basically roadway and all sorts of things. Now, okay, let's see, a lot of people wanting cost estimations, which is great. I want you to start thinking about what you're going to propose. This isn't a precision cost exercise. This is an exercise on can you categorize exposure, likelihood, and severity, but I'll quickly cost estimate the ones that have come in. Somebody's just said cost. Oh, okay, sorry, that refers to the above. So signalizing, let's start with that. Signalizing will be 3.9 million. Signalizer roundabout will be 9.2 million. Raising the intersection without signals, the whole intersection itself will be 585,000. Yeah, roundabout we've done. So guardrail, wire rope systems, with all the different setup. Well, if you're doing that as part of a project, I'll go at $150 a meter. But if it's just that you're doing, we're going to go at $300 a meter because you're going to set up costs. Rural intersection activated warning sign, 395,000 with signage and smarts. Yeah, to barrier system just to cover the drainage structures. Wow, we'll go 50,000. That's without doing any widening or anything like that. Okay, yep. So one of my things was you can't close the intersection. Yep. So again, the cost of a roundabout is, what did I say? 9.7 million. It's well out of budget anyway. Warning signs. Well, we'll go with $5,000 just to be safe. I mean, the signs themselves don't cost anything, but we need some traffic management to put them out there, and we need to mobilize the crew and then have somebody check it all. So all right, so remember, I'm going to give you some time now. Your task is to tell me your plan, but absolutely critical here is what is that going to influence? Exposure, likelihood of severity, or a combination? Maybe you're doing multiple things. Well, categorize each of them. Remember, if you're going to do something, so for example, one's come in there to take the road that's currently 70 kilometers an hour, which is a state highway, and drop it to 30 kilometers an hour. I might ask you, how do you plan to get that through? How do you plan to actually get that approved? Yep, so type your solution into the chat. And I'm going to give you a good 5 minutes to just have a ponder of it, categorize it, and type it into the chat. Don't just tell me what you want to do. Tell me if it influences exposure or likelihood or severity. Exposure, likelihood, or severity. Remember to say whether it influences exposure, likelihood, or severity. Seeing some really good ones come in and some very good classification as well. Well done. I'm giving you a few more minutes. Okay, I'll give you another 10 seconds to just finalize, pop in what you like there. We're seeing lots of good good ideas come in here. This is great.
Hey, Ken, sorry, just while they're coming through,
Mhm.
any chance we can change the pen color, especially on the grass? There's just a request if you can change the red to something else, please.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow. This is very impressive. Well done. I'm, yeah, really liking this. I'm also very impressed. People are starting to get their head around that exposure, likelihood, severity. I do see there's a few little things I do want to sort of point out and make sure people get their head around this in an early stage before you're too progressed in undertaking safe system audits, to make sure you get a few things right. But let's have a skip through a few of these, and then I will talk to some of these that are brought up as we go. Immediately, a lot of people gravitated towards signalizing the intersection, putting traffic signals or traffic lights, as some may call them, in there. And that would influence the likelihood of crashes. So that is generally, most people seem to get that. Occasionally, I did see in a few of these some people thinking that might influence the exposure to crashes. It does not. It has zero influence on the exposure to crashes unless you have some sort of traffic modeling report that says if you signalize this, you're going to get this influx of people using this intersection, so exposure might go up, or vice versa. Exposure might go down because they're avoiding the signals. But that's going to be most likely such minuscule changes that it doesn't actually manifest into major differences in exposure. And so signalizing is likelihood. Yep. So well done. So Max has given a very well thought through, and has not only told us about whether it influences exposure, likelihood, or severity, but how strongly it does that, which is actually, you're a couple of modules ahead, Max, in terms of actually sort of starting to quantify and think about the magnitude of these. Today's all just about categorization, but certainly you've categorized correctly there with the idea of raising the intersection would slow the vehicles down, thus influencing the severity of crashes strongly, and a little bit of reduction in the likelihood as well. Yeah. So then we have, I'm not going to get to read everybody's out here and analyze everyone's, because there's so many of them which are absolutely fantastic. And I will talk to most of these. I'm just pointing out a few things that are a little bit different. So we had one talking about advanced warning signs. So anything associated with warning signs or the like is solely a likelihood reducing factor. And if we take Max's sort of what magnitude are we going to get in terms of reduction in likelihood, it's very small. Warning signs are a very, very small reduction in the likelihood of crashes. And they're only the likelihood of crashes. It's not influencing the number of people that go through there, so the number of vehicles, the number of pedestrians crossing or anything like that. It's not influencing the severity, because they're still going to get going the same speed. They might be a little bit more alert. And yes, in some circumstances, they might be a little bit more alert and they might brake a little bit earlier and then they might crash a little bit slower. But we just still have that potential for them not to be any more alert and crash at that same speed, because this is one warning sign in amongst the 10,000 signs they've seen on this road in the last 5 minutes. So yeah, and they carry on as they're going. So things like REORs, they have a bit more of an impact on so that REORs, for those who don't know, are the rural intersection activated warning signs, which can reduce the speed limit on the main road during times that side vehicles are coming in. So that's an interesting approach, and I suppose generally used in rural areas, as is in the name, because of the lower number of side road entries. You just generally in urban areas and roads, you have that concern. They probably would trigger the speed reduction just almost all of the day, just due to the timing and getting people in and out and the like. But nonetheless, I really like the thinking, can we utilize some of that? And it would influence exactly as Charlotte said there, the likelihood and severity, and exposure would remain the same. Exactly right. In fact, I think it prize for that one, because thinking, can we utilize some of this technology, correct categorization? So prize there, that's good. I really could give out 20 prizes here. Some really excellent answers. Okay, Ash is going with that pedestrian underpass and a reduction of speed to 50 kilometers per hour. So reduces pedestrian exposure. Excellent, excellent. So that's right. If you can make your pedestrians not cross the road, not be exposed to the conflict point with vehicles, the exposure to pedestrian crashes goes down. Okay, that's excellent. Of course, with underpasses and overpasses and things, you've got to be ensuring that people will use them and the like. But that's into the details of it. The principles are absolutely spot on there. And the guardrail system, the severity of runoff road crashes, correct. And the 50 kilometer per hour speed limit would reduce both the likelihood and severity. I think Ash has to get a prize for absolutely perfect categorization. Yes, and then this little additional bit that Ashley puts there, which is if the speed limit is adhered to, and this would be a big issue. And I think that's important to remember, that we know speed limits are effective. They're really wonderful. They do a great job. and we can do, across the whole country, we can do so much better in managing speed with speed limits. But there's a lot more required to ensure people adhere to speed limits that are put in place, and they have that credibility and that they do it. So just slapping the sign up on its own isn't necessarily going to give us the objectives we want. It does likely give us some benefit, but maybe not to the point that we're absolutely hoping for. So prize to Ashley for that. And I'll unpack that a little bit more, I think. I do like the fact that some people have jumped on and leveraged on the school in the area that I sort of just slightly mentioned as I was passing. And Juliet's nicely done that by extending a school speed zone across this road. And I think prize for Juliet for really elegant use of that school, like leveraging off the fact that people find it hard to argue against a initiative to protect children. Okay. There's little bits of things always, bubbling away, but generally the population is absolutely on board with that. And they will say, oh, this is a bit annoying, but it's a school, I suppose I understand, right? So extending that out there, a really nice one. The race platform severity and the signalization just being a likelihood reducing factor. Now, yeah, I'm going to expand on that a little bit as we go. Well done, everyone. Yeah, wow, amazing stuff. Okay, let's build on some of the points that people have made and some of the ideas. Some of the ones that I missed as well, I jumped over because I knew I had slides associated with these that we can talk to. So signalization is about the likelihood of crashes. And we know that taking an intersection like the one we were looking at there and putting traffic signals on it will reduce the crashes that happen by about 45%. Okay. Of course, every individual site's going to be different, but if you do macro studies, so you take thousands of intersections that were giveaway controlled, and then they became signalized, and you analyze what were the crashes before, what were the crashes after, what were the changes in volumes and everything like that, we know about 45% reduction in crashes. And that is by stopping crashes happening. But we know when you unpack, for these 55% that are left, we go, they are serious crashes. So, Max is asking, is that all crashes or DSI, so death, serious injury, the high severity ones? Well, that's all crashes, the 45% crash reduction. All right. And this is where it becomes interesting in the sense that we know that we're reducing a lot of crashes happening, but the severity of the 55% that are left can be quite high. Yes, there will be some more minor ones, but we still see death and serious injury happening when we've signalized an intersection. And in fact, I just quickly grabbed New Zealand death and serious injury data from a 10-year period and sort of the outer Auckland area. Could have picked really any of the major population centers and sort of and then just quickly heat mapped them and said, well, where are your clusters of death and serious injury? And it's very driven by volume. But I also then just dived in to see, well, what are your intersection forms on a few of these? I've got to change color, sorry. Let's go purple then. Okay, signalized. I think that's signalized. What I'm saying is that traffic signals, they are safer than give way controlled or stop sign controlled, but by no means are they safe, right? But there continues to be pretty much worldwide, apart from parts of Europe, this impression from road designers, traffic engineers, and those managing the road system, that this is sort of the ultimate safe form of intersection until you have, funds to grade separate them occasionally. We need to change that mindset. This is, if you filter New Zealand's top 100 intersections of death and serious injury, signalised intersections dominate. And what we see is that we continue to build signalised intersections with some sort of hope that this one is magically going to operate safely compared to the last 1,000 that were built, which still present death and serious injury. So what we're saying is that the signalised intersection requires perfect human behaviour, and we don't have that. I can repeat this for cities all across the world, as I say, except for parts of Europe. That's outer metropolitan Melbourne, signalised. It's just where the death and serious injury happens. Now, why is that? There is a lot of exposure. There's lots of vehicles crossing each other. We know the extra risk at intersections from the avoiding and the like. Some people jumped on the idea of a roundabout. Now, roundabouts for passenger vehicles, talking just for passenger vehicles here, we know are an incredibly safe intersection form. Okay, we know that it is 85%. Now, I can't really see the purple there. I don't know if that's just my screen or others' screen, but it's about 85% reduction, if not more, in death and serious injury. In fact, it is death and serious injury in this case, because we know that you get quite a few minor crashes happening. Most of them are just panel beater style crashes, little rear enders, little side swipes and the like, very low severity. But death and serious injury is almost eliminated for passenger vehicles with the installation of a roundabout. But it's really all about the severity of crashes. That's how we're doing it. I'll come back to this little one. The reason I said immediately it's going to cost 9.7 million, or I might have said 7.9, but 9.7, it's just going to be super expensive because it needs to acquire a lot of land. So that intersection we were looking at, we wouldn't need to buy houses up. We would need to move the services. So the power poles, there would have been services running under the roadside. So the sewer and those sort of, we need to move those. That's just mega bucks to do that, like a huge amount of expense. Why? And so the question becomes, well, why do we need these roundabouts to be so big? And you need them to be big so large vehicles can make these turns. That's really why it is. And very different road environment here, but very small roundabouts, little painted dot there. Okay, so a larger vehicle, it can't be too large a vehicle, but it's just going to drive over that to get around their corner. So that will work. But does this provide any advantage? And the answer is yes, it does. But this one's a little bit different to why compared to other roundabouts. The principle we achieve here is this thing called disruption of priority. So by that, I mean, if this was a T intersection where one road had priority and the other road had a give way sign, the vehicle traveling on the priority road, the drivers would be somewhat tuned out. They would drive through at exactly the same speed, exactly the same angle. But as soon as we plonk this in and this and the little splitter islands, we've made it so everybody slows down and looks around and is more alert when they get to this point. And they're big wins in reduction in likelihood and severity of crashes. So this is the UK. This is in the UK. UK's sort of equivalent of a US four-way stop scenario. And I know New Zealand has some four-way stops. I think that either these mini roundabouts where you haven't had to change pavement, haven't had to widen, haven't had to move services and everything, just disrupt ultimate priority is a great option, or your four-way stops. Low cost, highly effective in reduction of likelihood and some reduction in severity of crashes. Okay, they're not perfect. We still have people running through them fast, but gee, they're a big step up from what we have with a priority controlled intersection. Okay, so oh, hang on. What do we got? Loretta's appeared. This means it must be a question.
I just thought before you move on to this slide, the previous roundabout, there was a question. So the one before this one, the roundabout photo doesn't look like it would achieve 30 kilometers per hour impacts. Too large, multi-laned, still beneficial, but is it a safe system even for vehicles?
So I'd want to look a little bit closer into what speeds we'd expect through this. But remember, for vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, side impact, we're talking about 50 kilometers per hour. And that's a direct right angle. And you wouldn't be able to actually get a direct right angle crash at this roundabout because of the way the vehicles sort of have to enter. Now, it is a bit of a what we call a tangential roundabout design. Okay, you're going to get a little bit of roundabout design 101 now. Now, I don't know what color to use. I'm going to use red, but whoever was having trouble seeing that, tell me if you're having trouble. You see, a vehicle coming up here gets that sort of skew, and then they come around like that. It's what we call a tangential roundabout design. A radial roundabout design will have the vehicle come in very straight and then almost like make quite an abrupt, so straighter like that, and then make a sort of turn like that. Now, that will significantly slow vehicles down. It adds a little bit more of a increase in the angle of impact, but it really does slow vehicles significantly down. But tangential designs are done really to accommodate larger vehicles, to intentionally not slow vehicles down to very, very low speeds through. They want this roundabout to sort of continue to flow and people to run through at around that 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. And that works really well. And when crashes happen, you've got the combination of it's within safe system vehicle-to-vehicle impact speeds, so 50 or below. The angle is actually going to be a little bit of more of a bounce off. So you can actually even probably jump that up somewhere around the 60 or below. So for vehicle-to-vehicle here, you're going to see wonderful outcomes. Okay, this one does appear to have some vulnerable road user facilities. So I would now start to be factoring that into my design and say maybe we do need to get things slower, because remember, vulnerable road user threshold was around that 30 kilometers per hour below for impact speeds. So good question though. So, roundabouts versus traffic signals 101 here. For passenger vehicles, conflict points. These are the points of crash you can have with vehicle paths. So there's less conflict points, and the conflict points are the least severe conflict points we can have. The angle, as I talked about, is just a better crash. The way the crash happens is better. You're starting to all go the same direction. It's good crash. It's good vectors. And this is the one to remind me to talk to you a little bit about waking people up, engaging them in the task. So people drive in all sorts of states of consciousness. We have people who are, they've worked a double shift, they're driving 2 hours to their brother's wedding, they've had a couple of beers, some people are thinking about the fight they've had with their partner, or the trouble their kids in, and or you name it, they are not activated in the driving task. And I dare say you would have experienced this yourself, and you sort of would have gone, oh, I don't remember the last 10 minutes of driving. Okay, that's even just part of it. It's being tuned out to the whole task of being activated with driving. A set of traffic signals does something to try to activate a driver into the driving task. But the geometry of the road just continuing straight through, nothing's really changed there. We're just relying on them, picking up those clues of the lights. We still see people shooting through these, sometimes intentionally, sometimes running trying to catch the last fleeting bit of green in it. And some people just have no idea that they ran through it. If you put a physical lump of infrastructure in the middle of where they're driving, they wake up, they come back to it, they engage with the driving, they look around, they slow down, they're back with it for a bit, and then they go back into their non-conscious state. Now, don't get me wrong, I want everybody to be alert, to have had a good night's sleep, had a cup of coffee, be, really focusing on the driving task. But the reality is that at the moment, we don't have that. People are continuing to work on trying to get better behavior. But if we know that there's a point in the network where risk absolutely spikes, which we do, which is those intersections, at least could we do things to try to activate people in the driving task at those locations in sort of an interim phase. A little bit of an interesting take on things there. But somebody pointed out there about the, I think it was Max talking about, well, a bit worried about that dual lane roundabout and the speed people are going to be going through that. And it's good questions to ask, because not all roundabouts are the same. And I just wanted to show this I find it interesting. You might find it interesting. There is a little bit of linking to what we're trying to achieve. But single lane roundabouts, which is this line, you see really good speed through them generally. These are big ones. Okay, we might want to get a little bit slower on some locations, but rural single lane roundabouts, that's pretty good speed. Dual lane roundabouts, you can see small dual lane roundabouts, people go through fast. But turbo roundabouts manage to take a 2-lane roundabout, bring it back into the the safety characteristics of a 1-lane roundabout. So what is a turbo roundabout? Here's a turbo roundabout, and turbo roundabout has a raised bit of concrete separator on the approach and throughout the roundabout. So if you want to do a right turn, for example, you get in this lane, you go around here, and you would go out there. If you want to go straight through, you could do it from either lane. You want to go left, you have to do it from the left lane. It's essentially channelizing the roundabout. So that's interesting. Have a look at this, though. Okay, first of all, this is a fairly radial roundabout. Look at the straight entry on this. Straight entry, and then it sort of turns, as opposed to it sort of tangentially sweeping around. So the first thing I want to point out is, look at this truck, okay? The truck has sort of entered the intersection, made a mistake, gone in there, and we've got this white van here. But we all look at that and we go, yeah, it'll be fine. Like, that van has to be going slow. There is no way they managed to get there going at very high speed. Look at the angle that they're going to crash at. Just beautiful. That'll be a bounce off. Nobody's getting injured out of that. And there we go. We see that mistake is happening and everything is going to be okay. Had this been just a T intersection or even signalized, and we had that truck pull out and that white van traveling at 70 kilometers an hour or so, oh, we're in big trouble. what was the inner radius? The radius of the roundabout, just the radius. Okay. Now, this one is just awesome and fun and looks just crazy, but actually, if you were on the ground, I don't think it'd be anywhere near as crazy as it looks. But this is in the Netherlands, and I flipped the image because it would be even more mind-boggling if we were all driving on the right. But the reason I do this is we had a Dutch engineer that we'd brought over to talk about cyclists at roundabouts, and I just happened to show the Dutch engineer this one and said, "Oh, this is amazing. Like I'm just fascinated by this. It's a big signalized turbo roundabout." And I said, in Australia and New Zealand, roads of that volume, they're either going to get those speeds and volumes. They're either going to get grade separation, but a lot of them won't. You can't afford to do that. So they'll just be a big, large, multi-lane signalized intersection operating at sort of 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers an hour even. And the Dutch engineer's sort of jaw almost hit the floor and said, what about the death and serious injury to your community? How could you possibly justify that? And I'm like, I know, it's insane. The Dutch would just, that is not a possibility to operate a signalized intersection at those types of speeds. They will create these sorts of things in order to ensure that vehicles are slower, angles are better, and when people make the inevitable mistakes they're going to make, they don't. They're not killed and seriously injured, or seriously injure or kill others. Anyway, it's awesome, isn't it? And then we also, of course, we're talking about bikes. And I said, and in Australia and New Zealand, probably just throw the bikes through that high-speed signalised intersection as well. And of course, there's the bike facility underpassing beautifully, continuing through. Anyway, I digress. But I like the fact that a lot of people are now starting to question some of these large signalised intersections, saying, what could we do? How could we alter things? How can we disrupt, and wake people up, get some better angles, some lower speeds? They're looking at ideas like this cut-through roundabout. This doesn't exist. This is a concept, but I like the principles of this, because we're now starting to address the severity of crashes. But one thing I am just super passionate about, and I absolutely love New Zealanders for this, is that when I run this training around the world, basically. When I run this training for New Zealanders, and I do that exercise, a lot of people are now coming back with raised safety platforms or raise the intersection. When I run this in Queensland, nobody says that. All right. And the reason is because it is such a traditional mindset in arterial road network management. And I was brought up in that road design mindset. Well, sitting in the region, if I had said, oh yeah, we've got a state highway, it's got 22,000 vehicles a day, it's got 12% heavy vehicles, it's a bus route. Oh, I would like to do some vertical deflection, some raised platforms. I would have been kicked out of the office. I would have been laughed at, and I would have been told to, this is insane. Arterial roads are for moving traffic speed, and you don't disrupt them. You don't disrupt the freight. You don't disrupt the buses. You don't. There's, ambulances and fire, and this is for vehicles, and you keep them going fast. Well, we've evolved. And I love the fact that New Zealand practitioners are putting this forward and saying that. And so that intersection we looked at was actually one of the first ones in at least the Southern Hemisphere, first one out of Europe, that really looked at saying, okay, we know traffic signals are going to reduce the chance of crashes, but we have to do something about the severity. We know other intersections in the area that are signalized, and in our region and in our country, they're signalized, they're causing death and serious. What else can we do? What can we actually do to address that severity of crashes? And And like many of you, they came to the conclusion, well, can we slow vehicles using some platforms, some not like urban speed humps, but just gentler platforms to reinforce you got to go a bit slower through this high risk point. Now, they just did it on here and here. Why is that? I'll let you, anybody, see if you can tell me, why have they just done, why didn't they raise the whole intersection? Should show you an actual picture of it, not the cartoony impression. There you go. There's it actually built. So, yes, good point. Cheaper, cost is correct. And Lewis can have the prize because, yes, well, others who said cost, you're absolutely correct. And so, yes, cost down. But what we're really trying to do is just address bullet vehicle speed, aren't we? Those are the vehicles that are going to do the damage. The vehicles coming in and going out, they don't have enough speed to do damage. They're not bullet vehicles. They're target vehicles. They're the ones that will cop the damage of it. It also is, I mean, there's a cost element to it, and there's an unnecessary disruption to a vehicle sort of dropping off here and on turns and things like that. You just don't actually need. So raised safety platforms. And the other thing I want to say about these, and here's a few photos of that one built. I was out there with a colleague doing the post-opening road safety audit of it. And there's a few important things I want to talk about the advantages of this. Okay, first one is you can see advisory speeds of 50. There's advanced signs to warn of this and 50, and yeah, it's quite visible. You don't need to actually do the challenge of speed limit reduction. Now, I don't need to tell this group about the politics of speed limit reductions, but there is, like, you put these in, okay, people don't argue about the speed they've got to travel over it, right? They might argue and get a little annoyed at you know, its presence because it's something different. But you don't need to do a speed limit reduction. You can do some advisory speeds through there. And people don't get angry about reducing their speed on their own accord. They tend to get angry when we put a black number with a red circle around it and demand they must when they don't feel they need to. But if they're navigating over something, and that's all we really care about, is getting the speeds down at the points they're going to crash. Okay. So I love this photo. I say I got to get this one blown up on and put it on the wall. We got green lights. We got a vehicle slowing down, approaching the conflict point. Now, some traffic ops people who are, friends of mine, they hate this. Well, they don't hate it. They're just like, it's so inefficient. Why are we slowing every vehicle through this point for this, 1 in 500,000 chance something is going to go wrong, 1 in a million chance something will go wrong. And I'm like, hey, if we'd put a roundabout in there, everybody would slow down and you wouldn't be complaining about that. It's just, you're just not used to this, are you? So it's something different. But it's wonderful. And another little awesomeness of these raised safety platforms is this thing. There's a traffic engineering phenomenon called the dilemma zone. I just love the naming of it. The dilemma zone is the point in time and space where the lights go orange and the driver doesn't know whether to stop or to put the foot down and go. Its official name is the dilemma zone. I'm sure you've been in the dilemma zone. What happens is as soon as you introduce this vertical deflection, this little bit of raised area, people's decision is basically made for them. They've already got their foot on the brake because they're slowing down to go over the raised platform. And they know that they're going to have to navigate it. They just stop. So we've just shrunk the dilemma zone, which is big wins as well in terms of late signal crashes and the like. And it was great to see. Yeah, I will. Yeah, Loretta, stay there. I love the fact that New Zealand's starting to get out there and put in these raised platforms. Now, this is the one down in Hamilton, the first one in. I spent some good time out there with Simon Crowther from Hamilton City Council, having a look at the site before, and just loving the fact that we're seeing it sort of built. I went down and spent a long time at this one in Christchurch. Again, I think it's a ripper. Well done. Of course, people are going to complain. It's different. They haven't seen this stuff before. It's natural. People will, find reasons to complain, but they are safe system principles, like at its core, really. So I'll leave that there and answer some questions.
Oh, there was some great interaction there. But there was just one in regards to if there's any consideration for emergency service vehicles like AMBOs on the vertical traffic calming.
Yeah, certainly. And we have across Australia and New Zealand, especially in Victoria, put a lot of these out on very major traffic ways, emergency services and the like. The emergency services feedback is they generally slow down through signals anyway, and these are not a major issue for them. That's their direct feedback. They're okay with them. They've got no major issues. And frankly, some of them say, yeah, if you can do anything to lessen the number of times we have to drag dead bodies out of these signalized intersections, that would be lovely. So we got some good support from them. US, there's some stuff out of Hawaii on raised pedestrian crossings actually along the route, and the emergency services really been coming out and supporting those strongly. So that was good. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I can just list all of these things that people come up with that are natural for us to be worried about, but when you actually do it, they're not as much of a concern. And those are noise. People are just like, well, this will just be a disaster for anybody in the area. The noise will be unbearable. Well, it hasn't actually played out like that with any of the acoustic modeling and things. Buses, the passengers will be flung off the bus. And no, the buses simply slow down to an appropriate speed and they navigate over it, and that's fine. What else? Heavy vehicle rollover. Again, you just design them so, well, you don't want to design it so it's on a weird skewed angle or anything like that, but heavy vehicles are fine. Motorcyclists, yeah, people worried about that same thing. People worried about also like, oh, people are going to hit these at speed and they'll like dukes of hazzard off into the houses. They'll be flying through the air and destabilizing. No, it's just not happening. People worried about rear end crashes going out of control. We see no evidence of increased rear end crashing, but that one can continue to be monitored. We've only got about 20 intersections in Australia and New Zealand on major arterial roads that have these. So yeah, we need to continue to monitor. But the only effects we're really seeing are about a 25% reduction in passenger vehicle deaths and serious injury, and about a 40% reduction in pedestrian and cyclist deaths and serious injury, and people slowing down. The signal operators, again, like in some of their jurisdictions that aren't doing this, they're going, oh no, this will disrupt the whole SCAT system. So because it won't be able to recognize appropriate headway of vehicles, and it'll blow the whole thing. Like these are technical things to work through and just reprogram signals and the like. They're not reasons to not sort of look at this. But I do want to say that, like, I am using this as an example of safe system principles. I'm not saying absolutely this has to be the only answer. I'm just saying great example of where finally people are saying, the signals that require absolute perfect human behavior all the time are not sufficient. We need to recognize mistakes will be made. And there's some more pictures. I like this one because this road has 54,000 vehicles a day, and this road has 27,000 vehicles a day. These are not small intersections, but people are putting raised. I really would like that to be a 20 and that to be sharper. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now, effectiveness and implementation of road safety platforms. You got the Austroads report. This report was done by some wonderful New Zealanders. So, get in and have a look at that. And there's different road practice notes from Auckland Transport. And you've got lots of wonderful things there that you can have a look at. Now, how are we going on time? What do we got? Half an hour left? I think so. Okay. I won't spend long on this. I just want, again, to sort of show some of the principles we're trying to achieve, where our traditional approach to the management, design, operation of road systems has let us down a bit, just because it doesn't have the best alignment with safe system principles. So this example here is a roundabout, okay, but again, the region, they couldn't afford a full-size roundabout. This gets into some specifics of roundabout design and the like, but a full-size roundabout was going to cost them something like $8 million here. They couldn't do it. They've got a telecommunication exchange building. They had all sorts of service challenges. They would have had to do big land acquisition because they needed the road to sort of have reverse curves going in. Lots of challenges. But anyway, they ended up at a point where they were just going to do some warning signs, some rumble strips, some right turn lanes, and they were going to leave it as a high speed intersection. But they said, no, that's just like, it's not well aligned with safe system principles. So they went with a compact roundabout. So this roundabout, and if I delete my little annotations there, this roundabout is actually very small, but it has this big concrete apron around it. So you can actually see there that the roundabout's just that little bit where those signs are. The rest of it is essentially at road surface, but that allows the large vehicles to track over those areas and make that turn without it having to go really far around it. But they were worried about some speeds of entry and the like. So that's, again, where they went with raised platforms to slow vehicles on the approach. But these are, gentle raised platforms. These are not like hitting an urban speed hump. And you can adjust your platform grades to elicit different speed. So there you go. There's actually a good little example of the little roundabout in the middle and then the big area to go around. Anyway, that ended up costing sort of like 3.7 or maybe it was 4 million. So it's about half the price of a full-size roundabout. It's still expensive, but like amazing that we could get double as many roundabouts in. Safety effect of this compared to a normal size roundabout. Well, I'm always cautious about taking one site and giving this is what you would expect because it's not really statistically significant as a sample study size. This one hasn't had any death and serious injury since it was constructed, and that was about 7 years ago. Okay, that's great, but again, I would say that is not statistically. You cannot say that means anything. We would need 20 of these or 10 of these maybe to understand that, or you would need to do more monitoring. But in terms of like speed reduction through, you can use that as a proxy often for the safety impact. We see wonderful speed reductions through that. Now, Loretta, we didn't even check this before, but I think you might have a little quiz that might pop up for people.
Yeah, I'll just launch that now.
Little poll, just something to pop up for you to have a little think now. And it's just one question. True or false? Traffic signals are not safe system. True, false, or Unintelligible question. That means, what on earth are you asking here? This doesn't make any sense. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. I'll give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's share results. We've got a bit of a mixed bag there, and that's okay. I mean, part of me, I think unintelligible question, it would be a fair comment. Ken, what on earth are you talking about? Is always a reasonable default position. Unintelligible question because of a couple of things here. I've given you no context. And also, talking about the safe system as a binary concept is just weird. Like, this is safe system or is not safe system. That, like, safe system is a philosophy, but when we actually get to operational on the ground, we talk about alignment with safe system principles. And I think it's got us in a lot of trouble as an industry. People, saying, well, we can't do that because it's not safe system. You're like, well, it doesn't align well with safe system principles, but there's some aspects that are decent, but there's some that are not. So saying something is safe system or is not, I'm not quite comfortable with that. But so unintelligible question would be a good one. False, I can give you because you're saying, well, it's not the signals itself that are safe system or not safe system or well aligned. It's the context in which you apply these. If it's a high speed area, then it's probably not well aligned with safe system principles. If it's a low speed environment and you've got good calming and things like that, then yeah, it's great. Yeah, bring it on. High alignment with safe system principles. And maybe those who said true had that particular context in mind, like the examples we did. But the reason I popped this up, we can end that, Loretta. The reason I popped this up was that I have had some people walk out of this course and say, well, we can't ever do signals again because they're not safe system. And I'm like, whoa, that wasn't my message. I just wanted to ensure that nobody's talking about that. But you understand the principles and the context and why in high-speed environments, traditional signalized intersections do not align well with safe system principles, because when mistakes happen, and I underline when mistakes happen, people die. Or they're seriously injured. It should be when mistakes happen, people have minor injuries or have to go to the panel beater or get annoyed. Okay, we can handle that. We can live with that. Cool, doing well. Oh, I've got to give an assignment out. Lane departure crashes. Okay, so lane departure crashes are one of our crash types, which is so violent in an injury perspective. So the speed that it happens at and the ability to tolerate the forces are so far apart. Because if you look back at our colorful chart of things, you'll see that we can really only handle side impact into power poles like this or into trees or the like at about 30 kilometers an hour. Maybe a little bit more. But we know these happen at 100, 110. We're so far beyond survivable forces. It's just like incredible. And we see these absolutely horrific crashes and cars just like absolutely ripped apart and hitting these power poles and the like. But we have so much of the New Zealand road network which has exposure to these trees, power poles, even culverts and the like. And so this is going to be a really significant challenge going forward in how do we address this. We're so far from what the vehicle can handle in terms of force when the crash happens. And so our choices sort of become, okay, major reductions in speed of travel, so we can start to be more likely to survive these when we have our community leave the road and hit trees, or implement the barrier systems so that when they leave the road, they run along a barrier system and the energy is brought down. We've also got the center of the road to deal with here. So you can see on this one, we've got that white line and that yellow line is all that is separating these vehicles from death. Because we know that one is about 70 kilometers an hour. 60, 70 kilometers an hour is where we really start to see it just go really bad. So up at 80, 90, and definitely 100, it's so much energy that is unachievable in us surviving those as humans. Even with the airbags, the crumple zones, the seatbelts, which are all helping for that frontal crash. So we've just got this massive challenge. And the massive challenge is associated with just the extent of road network that we're dealing with. When we had our little vehicle discussion, I told you that they upped the ANCAP crash test from 29 kilometers per hour to 32 kilometers per hour. So really that reinforces the vehicles are only playing a very small role in these side impact pole type crashes. Now, this one is a bit of footage which was estimated to be a crash at 60 kilometers an hour. And this is pretty graphic, so just be warned. So the violence of that in terms of energy transfer is like, that's incredible. Now, some people say, well, when do you ever see vehicles hitting poles and trees on the side like that? And that actually is a very common crash mechanics is that what happens on a rural road or long road, so this one's a bit urban, but let's take a big, long state highway. I don't know, driving up State Highway 1, and you've been driving along for a couple of hours, and you start to drift off and you fall asleep, and you drift off the road. Now, naturally, in most of that, you're going to drift off the road to the left because kind of trying to shed water off the road in its design. So there'll be just enough to just pull you slowly over to the left. Now, hopefully you'd be woken up by some audio tactile edge line or something like that. But if you haven't been woken up by that, then you get off and you're into the roadside. So you've slowly drifted off into the roadside. But at some point, then you wake up. When you wake up and you're traveling at 100 kilometers an hour off the road, everybody's natural reaction is to turn the wheel back to where the road is. And as a result of that, they start to yaw. Now, yawing is the sideways movement of a vehicle. So we've got pitch, which is the up and down. We've got roll, which is the side-to-side roll. And we've got yaw, which is that sliding. So the vehicle yaws and exposes the side of the vehicle to any point source hazards. So we've got this vehicle yawing, and then they might get back onto the road and then try and recover again and then overcorrect. So that's a double yaw, and then they'll expose the other side of the vehicle for a while. And so we get this, significant portions of time where vehicles are exposing the side. Now, electronic stability control is assisting a bit here. We do get some people who drift off and they don't recover. They hit a tree before they have a chance to get the vehicle yawing. But we do see a lot of that side impact exposure. Now, some of you might be saying, well, hang on. Can we just get rid of these trees and these power poles and these culverts? And first of all, let me say that there is practical issues to that, and there's probably ethical issues to that as well. Like, first of all, trees in the roadside often represent the last of our remnant vegetation. So nobody wants to remove that. It's sort of a wonderful source of vegetation. Okay, so that's one. And also the legislation is just really reinforcing that. You can't remove it. Like, you're not allowed to, or you pay offsets that are just huge. And that's all about stopping people doing that. Okay, so that's fine. The second one is, even if you were able to get out there and just absolutely clear out your roadside, at some point just flattens out. And we see that you don't actually achieve zero death and serious injury with these cleared roadside areas. You asymptote it out around 4.5 casualty crashes per 100 million VKT. So VKT is, prize for somebody who can tell me what VKT stands for, because I'm in a prize-giving mood. But casualty crashes per 100 million VKT is a genuine measure of like-for-like exposure. Ash is on it, vehicle kilometers traveled. So it's like it gives you a like-for-like comparison, a low-volume road versus a high-volume road, multi-lanes versus other lanes. So you can make like-for-like comparison. Anyway, that doesn't matter. So the idea of creating these big clear zones, A, not practical, can never really happen. B, is not actually going to give us the safest outcome we can produce. It will do some pretty big stuff early on. So the clear zone theory, which has been around for 60 years at least, which basically said, tell us your traffic volume, your speed, if it's on a curve or not, and we will calculate using this magic formula what area you should make free of fixed hazards. Okay? It's very old thinking. But we know following that is not necessarily a safe place to be. Vehicles go well beyond that. They roll over even in these cleared areas. We know that it's very effective for the first 4 to 5 meters, but that's about it. But it's extremely hard to achieve anyway. So on our major routes, on our major state highways, to keep vehicle speeds high, to keep the freight moving at speed, to get people from A to B quickly, we need those continuous barrier systems. And there is no point us just chasing the lightning strikes along this route to try, somebody ran off the road there, let's put a bit of barrier there. Oh, somebody ran off there, put a bit of barrier there. No, the whole thing presents risk, and we need to look at saying we need to make this what some people call the bumper bowling of roads. Like, people can fall asleep, and they will fall asleep, and they will not end up in a culvert, hitting a tree, in a ditch, rolling over. They will hit a barrier system. This is somewhat supported in the new Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6. It does talk about jurisdictional policy trumping whatever design guidance is in here. I don't have time to talk you through all of the specifics of this, but I've drawn this very simplistic diagram. Low alignment with safe system principles, high alignment with safe system principles. Very simple here. Full containment with flexible barrier systems. Great. All the way down here. And we're really going to want to start to sort of find the point where we say speed's got to come down. If we're not able to separate high speeds and provide outer barriers maybe, or have very low roadside risk environments, we have to reduce the speed. Okay, I'm going to make sure Loretta has time to take you through this assignment. We talked there about the wonderful new Safe System Audit Guidelines. Okay, Waka Kotahi is currently seeking feedback on this. This was issue number 1. There's a few points I've got, but overall, this is really wonderful. It's taken the Safe System Assessment Framework, it's put it into there, it's mixed it with road safety auditing, and we're on a win. The output of the first part of a safe system audit is to score a road design, the design of something that's being proposed, or an existing road, for its alignment with safe system principles using numbers. And you produce things like this. And next session, I'm going to start actually getting you to put these numbers to it. But what this is saying is here, for these different crash types, you can see run-off road, head-on, intersection, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist. You can see the red represents what's currently there. And the higher the bar here, the higher the risk, the worse it is. And then you can see, okay, they've proposed a roundabout. So we will have seen a design of a roundabout. And we can see that that brings the risk down on some of these crash types. Then they've got one that's got traffic signals and a modified T. And we can see, okay, that's, you know, brought it down here a bit. So that's good. And you can see, though, the roundabout here seems to have made things a little bit worse for cyclists. And conventional T intersection. So you're seeing we can start to quantify this a little bit. And we use a thing called the Safe System Assessment Matrix. I will go through this in much, much more detail in our next session. But to do this, we put a score between 0 and 4 for each of the cells of this matrix. Now, matrix, I use the term. It's just, I could just say table, couldn't I? It's just a table, each cell of the table. So we're putting a score between 0 and 4. So we say, okay, what's the exposure to crashes between 0 and 4? What's the likelihood of crashes between 0 and 4? And what's the severity of crashes between 0 and 4? Now, of course, AADT, so that's the volume of vehicles on a road. Well, unless it's a very, very low volume road, between 0 and 4 isn't going to work. So you need to go to a scoring reference sheet. And it just says to you, well, a 1 is less than 1,000 vehicles a day. A 3 is 5,000 to 10,000 vehicles a day. A 4, it's more than 10,000 vehicles a day. So you can see, you just find your traffic volume, you go back to this scoring reference sheet, you see where it sits. Likelihood, again, we start to take into account all of these different things we were thinking about. What's the speed? What's the geometry? What's the presence of shoulders? What's the lighting levels? What's the surface like? And we think about all of these factors, and then we use our judgment to decide, okay, is it highly unlikely that a crash is going to occur? Is it likely that a crash is going to occur? Is it highly likely? And we make a judgment call on a score between 0, which I don't think I have ever given in a safe system assessment, to crash likelihood, because we also got to take into account that people are going to fall asleep, be intoxicated, like do stupid things. Like, it's going to happen. So yeah, I might make it low, down at a 1, but 0 is a bit of a stretch. So you put that score in, and then you do the same for severity. And severity, we have that data, we have that graph to help us guide us a bit, but you say, okay, now a crash is actually happening. What speed's it going to happen? What are they going to hit? You know, what's the chance a heavy vehicle with more energy will be involved, making it more severe? What are the angles this crash is going to happen at? And you factor all of that in, and you give a score between 0 and 4. So what we'll do is pick up next time is take this, and we will elaborate on it, expand on it. And this is the first thing you really need to use in a safe system audit, to get that initial graph, which then helps you go into much more precise detail around the project. Remember, that's a little guidance C. You can now see 4 and a 3 and a 2 and a 1 and a 0. Where you can sort of say, okay, I get an indication of where I'm able to make those scoring calls. Loretta, over to you.
Yes.
To be the nasty one that gives people work to.
I'll just share my screen. Won't be a sec.
Great.
Alrighty. So look, honestly, this group, all over it. Everyone has completed module 1. So you know the system, everyone's logged in and everything. So shouldn't take me too long for my part. But we're at module 2, of course. You know, a video in there that you can reference, a quiz. I know everyone completed successfully quiz 1 for module 1, so that was great. But for today, module 2 assignment, so that's the safe system intersection. So once you click on there, there is a Word document that you need to download. So basically clicking on here, and I'll just open the file, and Ken will run through the actual sort of details of the assignment, but it is pretty straightforward. although I need to change that because we don't have 2 steps, we've got 4 steps. Sorry about that. But yeah, basically ensuring that you're filling in the sections that is highlighted in yellow. And Ken, did you want to run through and I'll scroll down?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is a general rule for assignments on this course. If it's highlighted yellow, you've got to do something. You've got to write something in there. So, obvious, your name. Now, you are going to pick an intersection. Now, this intersection could be the one just out the front of your house. It could be the one that you've always disliked on the way to work. It could be one you remember from your holiday, whatever it is, right? You pick one intersection. You're not going to have to go there. All right. If if it's out the front of your house, obviously you will be able to, but you're not going to have to. But we want to know where that is. So we want you to drop a Street View link or just even the coordinates of it. Just give us something so our markers can also dive in there and just have a quick look as well. So pop that in there. Then you go down and you'll see that we're going to talk about, surprise, surprise, exposure, likelihood, and severity. So the first thing we want you to do is look at that existing intersection and say, what is influencing the exposure to crashes? So that is like, what is influencing the number of pedestrians or the number of cyclists or the number of motorcyclists? So, examples could be things like it's a major arterial, it's got lots of lanes, it's a major through corridor, it connects the bus terminal to the shopping center, so lots of pedestrian exposure, whatever it is. But it's basically saying, what is influencing the number of people or vehicles exposed to crashes at that location? Now, we just want you to give either one thing or up to 3 things in there, and you don't need to elaborate on them extensively. The markers are basically saying, does this person understand what exposure is? Right? So you don't need to do more than a few words there because they'll go, yep, they understand it. Then we go over to likelihood and you put between 1 and 3 things that influence the likelihood. Now, this one should be easy because there's everything like sight distance for side roads. Is the intersection obvious? Is it well lit? Is it on skewed angles? Is there confusing line marking? Is it, are there no crossing points for pedestrians? Are cyclists exposed to left turning vehicles? Now I use the word exposed there. That's going to confuse people. Are cyclists likely to be struck by turning vehicles due to the geometry of the intersection? Anything in there that you go, oh, okay, that makes it more likely a crash is going to happen. Are vehicles coming in there really fast? Is it over a crest? Anything like that. Analyze it, pick things. And again, the markers are going to be, all they want to know is, yep, this person understands what factors influence likelihood. And then severity, of course, between 1 and 3 things that influence the severity of crashes. Now, we've talked about this a little bit. There's not a huge amount that really influences severity of crashes. Okay, speeds, angles. Is it a vulnerable road user that's going to be hit? Or maybe it could be things like, okay, well, actually, this connects an old person's home to I don't know what old people do, a bingo parlor. Like they're all the crossing there. Okay, if somebody gets struck, it's going to be more severe. So the fact that they're all old people could be in there. Anyway, so then you do between 1 and 3 there, and then you go, okay, so I've analyzed the existing conditions. Now, what could I change? This is very similar to what you did with that other intersection. What could I change that would alter the exposure? And this time I'm not restricting you, because all you need to do is just prove that you understand what changes would impact exposure. And just one of them. You can write 20. The marker's only going to read the first one. So don't waste your time. Put in something that will alter the exposure, something that will alter the likelihood, and something that will alter the severity. Any questions on the assignment? So once you've done it, you save it, PDF it. We like PDF, don't we?
Save PDF, and then just click on add submission. So once you click on add submission, you'll be able to either find the file or just drag it in and save changes. So pretty simple.
Yep. And then it'll get marked and you'll get some feedback if you haven't quite got that right. Now, if you are sitting there going, I don't really understand that, I heard lots of words and I'm quite nervous and feeling overwhelmed, please reach out. Okay, we will have one of our markers sit with you in a one-on-one meeting, and you can ask all your questions, you can talk it through. I think most of you have it. Based on what I saw coming through, I think it will be pretty fine. But don't feel bad if you haven't quite got your head around it yet. All right, this is a training course. This is what it's all about. Let's get you to really sort of understand that. So reach out for that, or chuck it in, get a bad mark, and then reach out for it. You get 3 chances.
You've got up to 3 attempts. That's right. Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great session. I didn't quite get back to those case studies, but maybe after the next session. All good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.